During the state-required waiting period for our divorce, my husband was in an accident and lost his memory. I became his attending physician. He fell in love with me at first sight, clung to me relentlessly, and even tried to become the other man for love. Dr. Anna, I don't think your husband deserves you. He doesn't seem to care about you at all. Maybe you should consider me instead, Chad said earnestly. I glanced at Chad, who had just narrowly escaped death. You're right, he doesn't deserve me. And he's about to become my ex-husband. Chapter 1. Less than 2 weeks after we separated, Chad was hit by a car, and I became his attending physician. In the hospital, the newly conscious Chad leaned against the bed. His refined features hadn't been ruined by the injury, if anything, they looked more fragile than before. He frowned at my name badge, his expression tense with pain. Your name is Anna? I tightened my grip on the pen in my pocket, ignored him, and turned to his assistant instead. The impact caused retrograde amnesia. He needs to stay hospitalized for observation. Make sure his family is notified. Over the past 2 weeks, Chad had erased every trace of me from his life. He had even replaced his assistant. The new assistant didn't recognize me and nodded quickly at my instructions. Okay. Thank you, doctor. Under Chad's slightly probing gaze, I led the rounding team out of the room in a small procession. Walking beside me, the intern Emily glanced back at Chad and lowered her voice, teasing. Anna, don't you think the patient in room 37 is looking at you a little differently? Like he's already fallen for you. You're imagining things. He wouldn't like me. How do you know? I just filed for divorce with him. Oh, wait, what? The kind of woman Chad liked was someone like Stella, bright, passionate, and full of spark. Chad and I had been married for 3 years. Thousands of days and nights together still couldn't compete with a single sentence from Stella. Chad, I regret it. Because of that regret, Chad slid the wedding ring onto her finger and left me alone in the bridal boutique while I was still trying on gowns. And now, when Chad and I had finally separated, he lost his memory and forgot both me and Stella completely. Chapter 2. Chad's job had never been easy, and I was just as overwhelmed at the hospital. After we got married, it wasn't until this year that we finally set a date to redo the wedding. But during the months I was preparing for it, Chad quietly replaced his secretary without saying a word. It wasn't until he used work as an excuse and left me alone at the bridal boutique that I learned the truth from his former secretary. The new hire he had insisted on was Stella. She was his first love. They broke up hastily after graduating from college, and she vanished from his life after that. Chad had mentioned her to me a few times over the years, always with a look of resentment. He had never gotten over the fact that Stella left him without a word back then. And yet now, all it took was a single expression of regret for her to pull him back, heart and soul. That night, Chad came home exhausted. As he loosened his tie, he talked about the wedding like nothing was wrong. Anna, which dress did you like today? I thought the first few you tried on suited you really well. Why don't we just buy all of them? He took my hand, the corner of his lips lifting slightly. We can keep them at home. Think of it as a keepsake. Chad, let's get a divorce. The words came out so abruptly they barely connected to anything before them. Chad froze, convinced he'd misheard. What did you just say? Tomorrow, we go file the paperwork. Seeing how firm I was, Chad went silent for a moment and let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. He pulled me down onto the couch and spoke with forced patience. Is this because I was busy with work today and couldn't go try on wedding dresses with you? Or because I couldn't book the ring you liked? I already told you, I'd make it up to you with something bigger and more expensive. Enough, Anna. Stop messing around. Divorce isn't something you joke about. My eyes were bloodshot from crying all day, my eyelids still swollen. Chad didn't notice at all. Instead, he leaned in and kissed me without warning. The kiss was meant to soothe, lingering and intimate, and it made my stomach churn. I shoved him away and wiped my mouth hard. I'm not joking. I just think you're disgusting. Chapter 3. The moment I said the name Stella, Chad's expression changed. Embarrassment flashed into anger, and through clenched teeth he agreed to the divorce. Anna, you're the one choosing to end this marriage. After we filed the divorce papers and walked out of the building, he threw those words at me and drove off without looking back. The way he said it made it sound as if he'd never once considered leaving me. All we needed to do was wait out the state-required waiting period. Once it ended, the divorce would be finalized. But just as I buried myself in work, trying to carve Chad completely out of my life, he suddenly changed his route on the way to a business meeting and ended up in a car accident. And now, Chad was under my care, my patient. What was even more unbelievable was that after losing his memory, Chad fell in love with me at first sight. On the morning of the third day, while I was doing rounds, Chad suddenly stopped me. "Dr. Anna, do you have a boyfriend?" He looked at me with wide, hopeful eyes. Beside me, Emily stiffened, then let out a stifled laugh she'd barely managed to hold in. Looking at Chad, who seemed unusually innocent after losing his memory, I hesitated. "I have a husband." Chapter 4. Chad and I were emotionally broken, but legally, the marriage still existed. Clearly, he didn't remember that at all. His family was on vacation overseas and wouldn't be back anytime soon, and for reasons unknown, Stella hadn't shown up either. Fortunately, Chad's injuries weren't too serious. At least, his mouth was fine. He started seizing every opportunity to talk to me, leaning on his cane and orchestrating countless coincidental encounters. During lunch break, I was eating alone in my office when Chad wandered past the door as if by chance, then casually set a freshly poured cup of warm water on my desk. "Dr. Anna, I don't think I've ever seen your husband come pick you up." My grip on my fork tightened. "How would you know? You can see the hospital entrance from the ward window. You come and go alone every day." All of a sudden, the Chad in front of me felt unfamiliar. He had always been calm and self-controlled. From the moment I met him, my strongest impression was how restrained he was. I had a vague sense that this version of Chad, the way he was acting now, was something I had only ever seen when he was with Stella. Confident, high-spirited, proud like a peacock in full display, even a little unhinged. Maybe I had never truly seen Chad clearly at all. That realization felt like my heart had been plunged into icy water, shrinking sharply in on itself. I closed my lunch container and asked him what he was trying to say. "I just think your husband doesn't seem to care about you at all, and I heard from your coworkers that your relationship is basically over. Someone like that doesn't deserve you." "He doesn't," I said. Chad's eyes lit up. I lowered my gaze. "And he's about to become my ex-husband." Just as Chad was telling me that life should move forward and that someone who didn't value me wasn't worth holding on to, there was a knock on the office door. Chad and I both looked up at the same time, staring so hard at the tall, handsome man in a jacket standing there that he visibly startled. "Dr. Anna, long time no see." Ryan snapped out of it, greeted me, then nodded politely at Chad, who looked like he was facing a mortal enemy. Hearing Ryan's voice, I found myself momentarily dazed. I stood up and walked past Chad. "Captain Ryan, what brings you here?" "I'm on vacation. I came to the hospital to see a friend." "A friend?" I paused. "Are you from around here too?" "No." Ryan hesitated for a beat. "An old friend from childhood. I heard you worked at this hospital, so I stopped by while I was here." He emphasized the word "stopped by," and I responded with a soft, non-committal "oh." In reality, this was only the second time Ryan and I had met. We'd met just a week earlier. I had been returning from a work trip, and Ryan was the captain of my flight. That trip had been turbulent enough that even thinking about it now made my palms sweat. First, a passenger had suffered a sudden medical emergency mid-flight, and I stepped in to help. The plane made an unscheduled landing, only for a mechanical issue to follow. The turbulence intensified, screams rising and falling like waves. Amid the chaos, Ryan's calm, steady voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Ryan. We'll be making an emergency landing shortly. Please brace for impact. My crew and I will do everything possible to get you safely on the ground." From the clouds down to the runway, my mind was shaken blank, holding on to nothing but Ryan's voice. It wasn't until the plane touched down smoothly that I finally found my breath again. As passengers disembarked in an orderly line, Ryan and I crossed paths. He extended his hand. "Hello, I'm Ryan. Thank you for helping the passengers on this flight." Watching the tension slowly leave his face, noticing the veins in his arm that still hadn't faded, I shook his hand. "I'm Anna." Chapter 5. Chad's gaze flicked back and forth between Ryan and me. When Ryan asked if I wanted to have a meal together sometime, Chad's cane slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor, making me jump. I glanced at Chad, utterly baffled, then politely declined Ryan's invitation. "I have a packed surgery schedule this week. I really don't have time." Ryan gave a helpless smile as he bent down to pick up Chad's cane and handed it back to him. That's a shame. By the time you're free, my vacation might already be over. Chad took the cane and cut into my conversation with Ryan. Dr. Anna, is your husband coming to pick you up tonight? The smile on Ryan's face froze, as if iced over in an instant. I called Chad's assistant over and had the unwilling Chad sent straight back to his room. When I turned around, I caught Ryan discreetly rubbing his face. What's wrong? I asked. Huh? Ryan stopped and shook his head. Nothing. My face just feels a little stiff. Dr. Anna, are you married? I am. The man you just saw acting all passive-aggressive is my husband. Our divorce is pending. He was in a car accident a week ago, lost his memory, and now he's my patient. That was a lot of information to take in. I could practically feel Ryan's brain spinning so fast it was about to catch fire. After a long pause, he said, "That's one hell of a coincidence. Our plane had to make an emergency landing over there, and over here, he ends up in a car accident." I froze, sensing something slip through my mind, something important I couldn't quite grasp. That afternoon, I disappeared into the operating room, and Ryan left the hospital. After 3 surgeries in a row, I leaned against the wall and gulped down a glucose solution, crouching there for a moment to catch my breath before dragging myself back to my office, soaked in cold sweat. I was packing up to leave for the day when I ran into Ryan again at the elevator. Night had settled in. He was sitting on a metal bench, head lowered, lost in thought. Ryan? What are you doing back here? He looked up when he heard my voice and smiled, gesturing toward the seat beside him. 2 boxes of chocolate energy bars were stacked there. I heard surgeries take a lot out of you. I was buying supplements for my friend and happened to see these, so I picked up a couple of boxes for you. 2 boxes? For me? I laughed in disbelief and pointed at myself. I wouldn't finish those before they expire. Ryan patted the boxes. That includes enough to share with your coworkers too. And don't refuse, and definitely don't send me money. This was my idea, and I was planning to ask you to look after my friend anyway. He laid it out so smoothly that it wasn't until he practically bundled me into a cab that I realized he still hadn't told me which department his friend was in. On my phone, my chat window with Ryan was still completely blank. I typed and erased a couple of times before finally asking where his friend was. About 10 minutes later, a message popped up from Ryan. Dr. Anna, my friend should be getting discharged soon. I'll trouble you next time he's admitted. Chapter 6. Chad's memory was still hazy, and only his assistant stayed by his side. It wasn't until he'd been hospitalized for nearly 10 days that Lucas finally came to see him. Lucas and Chad had been inseparable since high school, practically joined at the hip, and had even started their company together. After lingering around Chad for a while, Lucas came to find me. So you're really going through with the divorce? What else would I do? I can tell Chad still likes you. Agreeing to divorce you was just a moment of impulse. Was making Stella his secretary also a moment of impulse? Lucas choked on his words and frowned. Given how close he and Chad were, he must have known long ago that Stella had joined the company. But he chose to keep silent. And now that things had reached this point between Chad and me, he suddenly wanted to talk me out of the divorce. Lucas cleared his throat and continued to argue. You're getting divorced way too hastily. You might regret it later. And his feelings for Stella might not even run that deep. He probably just hasn't figured things out himself. I said nothing. Just as I fell into silence and Lucas was about to keep persuading me, Stella appeared. It was the first time I'd ever seen her in person, fragrant and vivid, like a rose in full bloom. She walked straight toward Lucas and me, pulled off her sunglasses, and fired questions in rapid succession. Lucas, why did you hide Chad's accident from me? You buried me in work and stopped me from going to see him. If I hadn't followed you here today, how long were you planning to keep lying to me? No wonder no one had come to see Chad these past few days. Lucas had been keeping it under wraps. From the look of it, he'd known about Chad's amnesia early on and deliberately tried to create opportunities for Chad and me. Lucas turned away impatiently, not answering Stella's questions. Stella shifted her gaze to me. You're Anna, aren't you? Was this all planned between you and Lucas? As she lifted her hand, I saw the diamond ring on her finger. It was the one I had chosen. Not large, but distinctive and unique. There was only a single piece. Chad had told me it was already bought by someone else. And in the end, it appeared on Stella's hand. Chapter 7. On the day Chad rushed out of the bridal boutique, Stella updated her social media. The photo showed a slender, pale hand, the ring on her ring finger catching the light. The caption read, "Late by many years." In the corner of the photo, part of a man's suit jacket was visible. It was Chad's. That same night, when I said I wanted a divorce, Chad flew into a rage. He couldn't understand why I would be so resolute about ending our marriage over just one Stella. He said all he'd done was give her a decent job when she was struggling out there, battered and bruised by life. That night, Chad and I sat facing each other. He tugged at his hair in frustration. "Why do you have to be so aggressive? Anna, when did you become like this?" Like a desperate man lashing out blindly, Chad turned the blame back on me. I placed my phone on the table. On the screen was the photo of Stella wearing the ring. Chad's gaze flickered, and he avoided my eyes. "I didn't tell her to post that. And that ring isn't even as good as the one I ordered for you." It was true. The ring Chad chose for me was far more expensive, priced at more than 5 times the one on Stella's finger. But what I cared about wasn't the price difference. What I cared about was the life I had poured my heart into building. As long as Stella wanted it, Chad could dig it out and hand it to her without hesitation. From the moment Stella reappeared, he'd been using one lie to cover another, unwilling to let go of either side, clinging to both, like a shameless coward. A price difference of 5 times, 10 times, even 100 times couldn't cover up the fact that this marriage had already begun to rot from the inside. So I chose to pull myself out of the mire. Now, in the hospital, just as I was facing Stella's accusations, and before I could say a single word, Chad's voice suddenly cut through the air and shattered the stalemate. "Who are you? And what gives you the right to demand an explanation from Dr. Anna?" Stella looked at Chad as he approached slowly on his cane, and for a moment, it was as if she'd been struck by lightning. "Chad, it's me. Stella. Stella. Stella?" Chad lifted his chin. "I don't know you. This is a hospital. What right do you have to boss Dr. Anna around?" Even Lucas, steady as he usually was, choked on his own saliva when he heard Chad say that and broke into a cough. A haze of tears welled up in Stella's eyes as she clenched her sunglasses so tightly they creaked. I heard a colleague calling my name. After taking a deep breath, I quickly stepped away from the scene, which had turned into something straight out of hell. As I passed by Chad, I paused for a brief moment. "She's your first love, and she's also the trigger that ended our marriage. Chad, you were right. My husband doesn't deserve me." Chapter 8. When I got back to the office, a group of coworkers were already tearing into the second box of chocolate bars. In this office, no one would bother picking up a $100 bill if it fell on the floor, but the moment pens or food appeared, they'd be gone in seconds. When Emily saw me, she immediately sidled up to my side. "Anna, since when did you start stockpiling snacks?" "A friend gave them to me." Emily let out a quiet laugh and edged even closer, her voice softening. "Anna, don't be sad. It's not worth it." She'd seen what just happened and had found an excuse to pull me away. I gave Emily, who was clutching an armful of chocolate bars, a light smack. "I know. Go eat." The office buzzed with casual chatter as I took a cup and went to refill my coffee. A splash landed on the back of my hand, stinging enough to make me flinch. I lowered my head, biting my lip until it turned pale, roughly wiping away the tears that spilled out after Emily's simple words of comfort. Stella stayed at the hospital to take care of Chad, just as she wanted. We both knew that once Chad recovered, everything would come to an end. Because I already knew how this story would finish, the moment I confirmed that Chad had regained his memory, I felt relief instead of pain. Chad went home, and bed 37 was assigned a new patient. The waiting period had ended. I texted Chad to set a time to finalize the divorce. But instead of hearing back from him, someone else showed up. "Your friend got sick again that fast?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise when I saw Ryan appear out of nowhere. "This time it's not about a patient. I saw a certain doctor post on social media that she lost a record while moving, so when I flew an international route this time, I happened to find the same one and brought it back." Ryan gave the craft paper bag in his hand a small shake. Inside was a vinyl record sleeve. I nearly lost control of my voice. "A limited edition record? Where on earth did you find that?" "Just good luck," he said lightly. I found it the moment I started looking. Ryan said it so lightly that I rubbed my fingers together and slowly forced myself to calm down. "I can't take something for nothing. I'll transfer the money to you." We're friends now. No need to draw such clear lines. If you really want to thank me, just treat me to a meal sometime. I looked into Ryan's smiling eyes, and a slightly reckless thought crossed my mind. Ryan, you're not into me, are you? I asked, half joking, half serious. My bluntness caught him off guard. Am I really that obvious? His honesty startled me just as much, and for a moment I didn't even know what expression to put on. Captain Ryan, even if we're friends, you don't really know me. I know, he said. That's why I'm still in the process of getting to know you. I just came out of a marriage. I'm not looking for a relationship. I'm only asking for a chance to get to know you. As if he'd expected that answer all along, Ryan showed no disappointment or irritation. He simply slipped the paper bag's handle into my hand and bent down slightly. Dr. Anna, you're highly capable, gentle, and smart. It's not wrong for me to like you, is it? His sudden closeness made me lean back. Under his puzzled gaze, I pulled out my phone and quickly transferred the money to him. Make sure you accept it. And Dr. Anna is very busy today. I really don't have time to entertain you. Ryan raised an eyebrow and walked away without the slightest protest. A moment later, my phone chimed with the payment confirmation. The next second, Ryan leaned back in through the doorway. Accepting the money doesn't mean I'm giving up. You just sent too much. I'll take it and use it as an excuse to buy you dinner next time. Chapter 9. Maybe it really was some twisted fate. After Chad recovered his memory, he suddenly refused to divorce me. Lucas said that after being discharged, Chad had been depressed, even neglecting his leg rehabilitation. He hoped I would try to persuade Chad instead of only contacting him to talk about divorce. At the time, Chad suddenly changed his route because he heard your flight had made an emergency landing. He wanted to go find you. He never really stopped caring about you. Reading Lucas's message, that vague suspicion in my mind was finally confirmed. Strangely, I didn't feel moved at all. I almost wanted to laugh. Back when Chad was discharged from the hospital, Lucas had already told me the real reason Chad and Stella broke up all those years ago. They'd been wildly in love, seeing each other as the only one. But Stella's family was deeply unhappy. Her parents neither cared about her nor saw her as anything more than a source of money. When she graduated, she pinned all her hopes of escape on Chad. But Chad was young and impulsive, with no real plans for the future. Unable to see any hope, Stella left quietly, without a word. Chad became a laughingstock, withdrew for half a year, then emerged completely changed, becoming the calm, restrained man I later met. By all rights, it was one of those stories where no one should look down on young hardship, a fiery youth that endured trials and eventually found its way back together. But Chad backed out. After a moment of silence, I replied to Lucas's message. His car accident wasn't my fault. As a doctor, I've already done my job. I knew Lucas would say I was being too cold. So I blocked him outright. Chad kept avoiding me, delaying things again and again. The stalemate dragged on until the day an earthquake struck the quake zone. The hospital dispatched a medical team to support the disaster zone, and I was among them. Before we left, Chad somehow got wind of it and called me. You're going to the quake zone? Are you insane? That's an active disaster area. His voice was urgent, laced with unmistakable anxiety. I don't have time for this. Don't hang up, Chad cut me off. I'm on my way to you right now. Didn't you want a divorce? Stay where you are. We can sit down somewhere and talk it through. Chad, I said evenly, I hope you understand this. Before I ever became your wife, I was already a doctor. From the other end of the line came the blare of a car horn. He really was on his way. But I ended the call, picked up my bag, and boarded the bus. Chapter 10. The earthquake had destroyed countless buildings. By the time our medical team finally reached the disaster zone, all we could see were stretches of ruins. Collapsed structures buried lives beneath them, and amid the aftershocks that struck without warning, rescue teams flooding in from all directions were racing against death itself. I was almost completely cut off from the outside world, sometimes losing track of time altogether. The relentless pressure, both physical and mental, made it impossible to truly rest. At night, I lay prone in the tent. Half asleep, half awake, I vaguely sensed someone entering. My eyelids were unbearably heavy. I didn't even have the strength to open them. As if in a dark dream, someone stopped beside me and tended to the abrasions on my hand. I think I understand you well enough now. You're really stubborn. If I'd known, I wouldn't have praised you for being gentle back then. A hand lightly ruffled my hair. A sigh-like voice drifted through the stifling air. When a colleague woke me later, and I saw my hand, clearly treated, under the light, I froze. It wasn't a dream. Instinctively, I scanned my surroundings, searching for that familiar presence. Seeing my reaction, my colleague explained. A friend of yours came by earlier. His family donated some supplies, and he was the one who delivered them. Did he leave? He seemed really busy. He stayed less than 10 minutes and left overnight. Ryan's face flashed through my mind, and for a split second, my heartbeat went out of rhythm. I shook my head, forced every stray thought away, stretched my stiff limbs, and threw myself back into the rescue work. After the mission ended and we left the disaster zone, the hospital granted us 3 days off. I slept at home for a full day and night. When I woke up, my hands and feet were numb. On my phone, an unread message from Ryan showed a photo, stars scattered brilliantly beyond an airplane window. Bit by bit, my energy returned. I decided to step out and take out the trash. But the moment I opened the door, I jumped in shock at the sight of Chad leaning against the wall outside my place, clearly having been keeping watch. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like he'd been waiting there for a long time. When did you get here? Around noon. I heard you were back and on leave, so I came by. I thought you might not be home. I'd been sleeping too deeply to hear any knocking. Chad hesitated, as if wanting to say something but holding it back. I rubbed my aching eyes, took in how pale his face looked, and stepped aside to let him in. Come in. Let's talk inside. The warm light from the floor lamp spread over him. I poured myself a glass of water. Chad reflexively reached out to take it, and awkwardly pulled his hand back when he realized I was drinking it myself. Anna, how have you been lately? Are you feeling okay? I'm fine. I set the glass down and went on, you actually came at a good time. I was going to look for you tomorrow anyway. I had to leave for the disaster response in the middle of everything, and we missed the window to finalize the divorce. The case was closed for inactivity. We'll have to refile. Anna, I don't want a divorce. I already agreed to it once on impulse. I can't make the same mistake twice. Chapter 11. Chad said he wanted to forget Stella too. But as the one who'd lost in that relationship, the harder he tried to forget, the more sharply Stella's departure carved itself into his memory, slowly turning into an obsession he refused to voice. So when he ran into Stella again by chance, he couldn't stop himself from falling back in. He watched her struggle again and again, then appeared like a savior, offering her a respectable, polished job. Back then, he had promised her a grand wedding and a dazzling diamond ring. So when Stella admitted her regret and said she was sorry, Chad seemed to redeem himself in his own eyes, abandoning me while I was trying on wedding dresses and rushing to her side. Even when Stella set her sights on the ring I had chosen, Chad still gave it to her. As for making it up to me, his solution was simply to spend more money, trying to patch the cracks in our relationship with a higher price tag. Chad leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, covering his face. His voice came out muffled. Anna, I never planned to divorce you because of Stella. I just. He couldn't finish the sentence. You just couldn't let go of the fact that she abandoned you back then, so you wanted her to witness how successful you are now, I said, finishing the thought for him. Chad looked up at me. When he saw the disappointment and cool detachment in my eyes, he froze there on the couch. I understand that you wanted to use your current power and status to make up for the humiliation you felt back then. But that doesn't give you the right to hurt me or to bargain for forgiveness. I always thought you truly loved Stella, and I never wanted to fight another woman over a man. But in the end, you were wavering between the two of us, or worse, just spinning a beautiful illusion for her. You satisfied your obsession, figured out your own feelings, and then shifted all the blame onto Stella. Chad, the person you are now is so despicable it's frightening. The color drained from Chad's face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Maybe he thought that laying bare his past would make me understand him, forgive him. But from the moment he started pushing the blame onto someone else, the pettiness and cowardice he tried so hard to hide were completely laid bare. Chapter 12. Chad rarely looked this desolate. We first met at an alumni forum. After that, in the span of just 1 month, we ran into each other 4 times in completely different places. As if it were fate, we shared the same hobbies, the same tastes, even eerily similar habits in daily life. From dating to marriage, everything followed naturally. We never fought. Not once. The only real conflict we ever had was when I asked for a divorce. Even now, looking back, it feels absurd. I can't understand how Chad and I ended up here. Maybe there really are people who get trapped by their obsessions for an entire lifetime. So much so that Chad spared no cost trying to mend an old wound, only to hurt the people around him in the process. He spoke again, his voice rough and strained. After we left the courthouse that day, I was angry with you. I thought that if I erased every trace of you from my life, I could forget you. But the moment I heard that the plane you were on had malfunctioned, I was so terrified I nearly lost my mind. I regretted agreeing to the divorce out of sheer impulse. Anna, I really do know now who the person I love is, even if you'd just give me a chance to make things right. His voice gradually faded. I leaned back against the sofa and let out a heavy breath from my chest. I'm not something you get to keep. And I'm not your property. Chad, you should remember that the reason we fell in love in the first place was because we were both independent and admired each other. I've never regretted my choices. That was true when I married you, and it's still true now that I'm divorcing you. I did love Chad once. And at that time, he was worth loving. But he had slowly become a stranger. And I wasn't going to diminish my own dignity for his sake. As for Stella, I know she went through a lot. That's why, after reuniting with Chad, she wanted to cling tightly to what she saw as a lifeline. I didn't aim my anger at her, not because I pitied her or chose to forgive her. I simply knew who the real source of my pain was, and Stella wasn't worth my time. After I made it clear he should leave, Chad stood up in defeat. Still unwilling to give up, he asked one last time, if I refuse to divorce you, what will you do? I'll have my attorney file a contested divorce and let the court decide. But if it turns ugly in public, it won't help your company. Chad lowered his head and forced a bleak smile. Anna, you haven't changed. You've always been this calm from the day we met. I'm the one who changed. Calm? I don't know. All I know is that after you finish crying, you have to keep moving forward. When you walk into a dead end, you have to turn back in time. Chad dragged his heavy steps toward the door, leaving behind only one sentence. Pick a time. We'll meet at the courthouse. Chapter 13. After countless twists and turns, the divorce finally went through. After everything was settled, I received the share of marital assets I was entitled to. I donated all of it to my alma mater and set up an education fund. Sometime later, I heard that Stella and Chad had fallen out badly. In the end, she left the city, and Chad faded completely out of my life. Completely unlike Chad was Ryan. His presence in my life gradually grew stronger. Even Emily had come to know him. The moment Emily bounced over to me with shining eyes and a conspiratorial grin, I knew Ryan had shown up again. Anna, that chocolate bar guy comes by really often. I think he actually seems pretty reliable. Chocolate bar guy. The nickname made my vision go dark for a second. I poked Emily in the waist. Since when did you start taking his side? Hey, free food buys a lot of goodwill, she said, hands in her pockets, utterly unapologetic. And Ryan was even more unapologetic than Emily. I'm not here for no reason this time. I'm moving into a new place. You have to come congratulate me. Moving? I echoed, surprised. Ryan nodded calmly. I'm relocating to this city. I'm always flying back and forth anyway, so it doesn't really matter where I live. And this city isn't far from my family. If you were moving, you could have just sent me a message. Why come all this way? If I can see you in person, why would I text? He shot back. That one question left me with nothing to say. After a moment, I asked, so when's the celebration? This weekend. On your day off. Ryan named the restaurant and lifted his chin proudly. Getting a two-person table there is really hard. 2 people? I eyed him suspiciously. No one else? Don't you still have that old classmate here? Ryan's expression stiffened. He let out an awkward laugh. Maybe he's sick again. Even he didn't quite believe it. He laughed at himself, then sighed. All right, I'll admit it. There was no such person from the start. I came to see you. I swear, that's the only thing I lied about. If you'd already had someone in your heart back then, I wouldn't have bothered you again. But you'd already filed for divorce, so I thought maybe it was my chance. Ryan's honesty and sincerity burned like a flame, carrying a heat that could sting. I pressed my lips together, then decided to lay everything out clearly. Ryan, you've probably noticed, I'm not someone who just goes along with everything or stays gentle without an opinion. Ryan grew serious as well. I know. I could tell the moment I found you in that tent in the disaster zone. Good. I paused, then added, I'll be going abroad this November on a government-funded program for a full year. It's a rare opportunity, and I'm not turning it down. After hearing that, Ryan let out a long breath and broke into a smile again, his eyes lighting up. Advanced training? That's a great thing. You suddenly got so serious, I thought you were mad at me. His immediate, unhesitating response caught me off guard. And all at once, I realized that from the moment I met Ryan until now, he had always respected my choices. You just moved to a new city, and I'm about to go abroad. You don't mind? I moved because I like you and wanted to be closer to you, not to tie you down here. I'm a pilot, I know you can't deviate from a flight path. You have your own trajectory in life. I'd only be happy for you. Anne. Ryan leaned in, bent slightly, and looked straight into my eyes. And you have such a strong sense of self. That just makes me like you even more. Chapter 14. The following winter, after finishing my training, I boarded a flight home. It was a direct flight. Passengers settled into their seats one by one, and the seat next to mine was taken by a friend I'd met during the program. We both had our heads down, translating papers, time passing slowly. Just before takeoff, a familiar voice suddenly came through the cabin speakers. My hand paused on the tablet screen. A soft laugh slipped out, and it felt as if something gently struck the center of my chest. Anna, what are you smiling at? My friend nudged my arm, puzzled. Nothing, I said. I just think, this captain named Ryan has a really nice voice. I closed the screen and looked out the window as the plane gradually lifted off the ground. The aircraft stayed true to its course, heading toward home. After we landed, I found Ryan at the airport, hurrying toward me. Surprised? He walked over quickly, the grin on his face impossible to suppress. I dropped my luggage and threw myself into his arms, hugging him tightly. Thank you. Yes, very surprised. He stiffened for a split second at the sudden embrace, then pulled me in even closer. It took long enough to get a hug from you. Then I'll hug you more often. That's better. Ryan buried his face against my shoulder. After a moment, I heard him say, Welcome home. My Dr. Anna. Chapter 15. Chad heard the news that Anna was getting married from a business partner. That partner had business ties with Ryan's family and had received an invitation. At first, Chad thought he'd misheard. Unwilling to accept it, he got hold of another invitation through someone else. One glance was all it took for him to recognize the design on the cover as Anna's work. 3 years earlier, Anna had designed invitations for the wedding they never had. The two designs were completely different, yet Chad knew instantly. Anna was getting married. She was really getting married. Like a blade that had hung over him for far too long finally coming down, Chad lit a cigarette with stiff fingers. The red ember flared for a brief second before he abruptly stubbed it out in the ashtray. He remembered that Anna never allowed him to smoke. The room felt unbearably empty. Chad picked up the invitation again. Anna's name and Ryan's were printed side by side, painfully bright. One was an industry standout, one of the youngest attending physicians to rise to leadership in the city. One was an airline captain who had been a standout pilot since his early days. Together, the two of them were evenly matched, so perfectly suited that it made Chad's heart tremble. He had seen Ryan before, during his period of amnesia, in Anna's office. He could tell even then that Ryan already liked Anna. That wasn't surprising. Anyone falling for Anna wouldn't be. What Chad only learned later was that Ryan had been the captain of the flight that made the emergency landing Anna was on, while he himself had gotten into a car accident on the way to find her. It was as if, from that moment on, everything had been foreshadowed. He was already completely out of the picture. When Lucas found out, he couldn't bring himself to offer any real comfort. All he could do was tell Chad to try to let it go. Anna had long since cut off contact with Lucas. Now, whenever he thought back to how he'd once tried to persuade her to reconcile with Chad, he felt a wave of secondhand embarrassment. Business hadn't been going well these past 2 years. Stella had once believed Chad would marry her, only to have him abruptly propose a breakup instead. She saw everything Chad did as retaliation against her. Before leaving, she made a hysterical, scorched earth scene, sparing no cost. The fallout hit the company hard, costing them several major clients in a row. Lucas was swamped at the company, and in a moment of inattention, Chad, almost as if punishing himself, slipped away and secretly went to Anna's wedding on the day itself. Ryan had spared no effort in making the wedding grand. Aside from designing the invitations, he had personally handled nearly all of the preparations. Friends and family from both families were present. Blending into the crowd, Chad spotted a young woman who looked familiar. She was one of the interns Anna had once supervised, Emily. He'd heard she'd been formally hired and was still working in the same department as Anna. Emily had practically witnessed the entire journey of Anna and Ryan, from dating to marriage. To her, Anna had been both mentor and friend, so even before anything had really begun on stage, Emily was already crying so hard her face was a mess. Chapter 16. Compared to Emily, Ryan was no better. He burst into tears before he could even start speaking. Anna tilted her head and wiped away his tears, her own eyes reddening as well. For me, it was love at first sight. You have no idea how fast my heart was beating the moment you turned around at the cabin door. But back then, you didn't like me. Ryan choked up. Thank God you were willing to look back at me later. He took Anna's hand, their fingers fitting together as if they'd always been meant to. The words love at first sight stabbed straight into Chad's chest. He remembered that he, too, had fallen for Anna at first sight, twice. The first time was at the alumni forum. Back then, Anna was only 24, a rare talent praised by the medical school's professors, brilliant, gifted, and willing to work harder than anyone else. Chad didn't study medicine and was 2 years ahead of her. That day, he'd only returned to campus to visit a professor and had met Anna purely by chance. On stage, Anna spoke with ease and confidence. In Chad's eyes, she seemed to glow with a soft halo of light. He longed for a life like that, and without realizing it, he drifted closer to her, drawn to the warmth she radiated. The second time was in the hospital. He had lost his memory, and when Anna came in on rounds, he couldn't take his eyes off her at all. His instincts recognized who he loved before his memory ever could. And yet, in the end, he still lost Anna. He should have known long ago, Anna was never the kind of person to lie to herself. Up on the stage, Ryan had already wiped away his tears. His hands trembled as he slid the ring onto Anna's finger. Hands that never shook during emergency or forced landings were now trembling like leaves. Seeing tears well up in Ryan's eyes again, Anna laughed softly. She helped guide the ring into place, then slipped the other one onto Ryan's finger herself. Rising onto her toes, she kissed him. I may not have fallen in love at first sight, but I promise you this, every day from now on, I'll love you more than the day before. She said it solemnly. The crowd erupted in cheers. Chad clapped along as well, mechanically, his expression hollow and lost. A stranger patted him on the shoulder and asked if he was feeling unwell. Chad lowered his head. I'm fine. He was just thinking about his former wife. That woman who was gentle and radiant on the surface, yet steadfast and decisive at her core, she had once trusted him completely, loved him without reservation. Chad drifted out of the wedding venue in a daze, the sound of white doves being released faintly echoing behind him. He knew this was all his own doing. His hesitation, his wanting everything at once, had pushed everything beyond repair. So it was only right that he remained trapped in a new obsession, stumbling through life in quiet defeat. And Anna and Ryan had already found solid ground. They had landed. At this point, my love life is a public service announcement. Free of charge.